I'm going to start by speaking about COVID. So I know that you are all watching the national news and reading the papers about the situation in the country with regard to COVID. And nationwide, we are seeing a pretty substantial increase in the number of cases of COVID, particularly across south and southwest parts of the country. But we're also seeing increases here in our region. Not as big of increases and not as extreme of increases as in some parts of the country, but we are seeing some increases. So let me give you today's numbers. So as of today, well, these numbers are 2 days old. You all know that hospitalization numbers lag a couple of days. But as of a couple of days ago, there were 321 people in the hospital in our region who either had confirmed COVID or were suspected of having COVID. So that is an increase. These numbers, these hospitalization numbers, have been going up and down pretty significantly over the last few weeks. And part of that it seems to relate to maybe weekends and holidays and that sort of things, but what we can only deal with here is the numbers that were put out yesterday, which is 321 individuals in the hospital now. And we had a high back a couple of months ago of around 775. So this is still much better than that. But we are concerned about the increase that we are seeing. Yesterday, let me get you the right numbers here. Wait a minute. Where's my right numbers? Hang on, bear with me for 1 second. These numbers are old ones. Okay, I'm gonna wing it, Kyle. Do we have the new numbers here?
For today?
Yeah, what did I do with them?
Home.
All right, I'm sorry. We're gonna find these while I'm talking to you. Kyle, where is that sheet that we just had? You got it there? Okay, sorry all. Thought I had it printed out, maybe not. So as of yesterday, there were 36 people admitted to the hospital, 35 the day before, 32 the day before that, and 17 the day before that. So what you're seeing is these last 3 days of having 30-something, 32, 35, 36 people admitted to the hospital is worrisome to us. And in addition to that, the average 7-day rolling average of hospital admissions right now is about 27. Now, later this afternoon, we'll get some new numbers, but certainly I think those are numbers to be concerned about. And as we've said repeatedly, and I know you're tired of hearing it, but as we've said repeatedly, you really do have to wear a mask. Whether you're definitely inside, you must wear a mask. That's mandatory. Outside, it's highly advisable. Just wear your mask when you're outside, because what I find is that you never know when you're going to be closer than 6 feet to someone. So please wear your masks. We really do not want to have to pull back on reopening. I've talked about that before. Some of the things that we're concerned about are particularly situation in bars, and this isn't all bars. Some bars are quieter places where people are sitting far apart, but there are some bars who are bigger where people are not practicing social distancing. Sometimes the noise level in a bar, maybe there's music in the background, maybe there's just a lot of people talking, and so that means that as you're talking to someone you're with, you're somewhat yelling, not literally yelling, but you're speaking very loudly and projecting, which causes more aerosol. So we are very concerned about that and think that an indoor situation like that is really one of the places that we suggest people not be. You can still go out, you can still be with your friends, try to be outside or try to be inside where you have really good ventilation and maybe you're sitting by the door if you have to be inside. But these numbers are worrisome. And part of the reason that I talked about bars, I know people of all ages go to bars. I do understand that. But I also know that when you're in your 20s or maybe your 30s, you tend to go more often than people in my age group. And what we're seeing here is that the largest number of positive cases in the city of St. Louis is among 20-year-olds, 20-something-year-olds, so 20 to 29. It's just equal virtually to people in their 30s. So of all of our cases, of our 2,849 cases in total, one third of those cases are for people in their 20s and 30s. So it's very worrisome because not just that 20-something or 30-something-year-old gets COVID, which of course is very concerning, but also the older people, the more vulnerable people, that they may be exposing to COVID unintentionally, for sure, unintentionally. We know no one would want to expose their grandma or their parents or someone with an underlying health condition, but that is the situation. So those are the COVID numbers now. You know, I've been speaking about this in a fairly serious, sober tone, I think, for at least a week or 10 days. And the numbers are continuing to rise up a bit. St. Louis City and County are better than many, many places in our nation. But nevertheless, we are seeing an upswing in the number of cases. And none of us want to have to shut business down again. So we've got to rely on every one of you to do the right thing, wear a mask, keep your distance, at least 6 feet apart, wash your hands. But this wear a mask thing is the biggest thing. And I know that this has been politicized a lot, this whole mask wearing thing, but really don't fall for that. This isn't a political thing. If you get sick, it's not about whether you're a Democrat or a Republican. It's about trying to keep everybody well, and as many people as possible well. So maybe that's enough for COVID today. But thank you for taking this seriously, because if you don't take it seriously, other folks that you're around won't take it seriously either. So lead by example here. All right, that's COVID. I want to talk for another minute about a couple of the CARES Act programs. And some of you have heard this, but maybe there are some new people who are signed in today that have not heard this. One, today's kind of a nice day out, not terribly hot, but let me tell you, we are in for, if the weather forecasters are correct, we are in for a really hot week. So don't forget about Cool Down St. Louis. If you need help with your utility bills, or if you're over 65 and or disabled, if you need an air conditioner, please log on to cooldowstlouis.org. Log on. We can help you with either one of those. Through our CARES Act money, the city allocated $3 million to heat up, cool down St. Louis in order to help people keep their air conditioning on this summer and their heat on in the winter. But right now we're focusing on that air conditioning. So if you need help, please contact cooldowstlouis.org. And you know what? Maybe you can help. Maybe you don't need help, but that you've got the capacity, you've got the ability to help by making an additional contribution to Cool Down St. Louis. And if you can, please do that as well. Very important for us to be able to keep air conditioning on. And we know we've been into too many houses. And when I say we, it's usually our fire department who is going house to house, or our health department checking on people. We're asking you to help with that as well. But the fire department reports all the time that they will knock on a door of somebody that they may be checking on. And sometimes, but not always, it's an older person who has a working air conditioner in the window who doesn't turn it on because they don't want to pay the electric bill, or because as your body temperature warms up, you don't feel the heat as much. So really important to check on your neighbors, run your air conditioners. We'll help you with the utility bills, because we want to avoid really serious illness and even death that can come from being overheated. So that's funding for Cool Down St. Louis. This week is going to be a scorcher, if the weather people are right, and looks like they may be. All right, last subject before we go to questions. I talked a few days ago about this, but through our CARES Act money, which was passed by the Board of Aldermen on Wednesday, I believe it was, signed by me on Thursday, the bill was signed on Thursday, St. Louis Development Corporation has $5,000 grants available for small businesses. This is businesses with 25 or fewer employees. They expect to make 800 of these $5,000 grants available. At least half of these grants are going to be going into promise zone areas, opportunity zone areas, areas that need assistance the most. They have approved, and they just got this money last Thursday, so far they've approved 231 of the grants. They're continuing to work on this, and they hope to begin dispersing these funds by the end of the week. These are grants that may help these very small businesses. You can think about 10 employees, 15 employees, 20 employees. Help them stay alive and help them keep their payroll going, keep some folks employed. So it's $5,000 is a small amount in some ways, but it may be just the amount to fill the gap to help keep these small businesses afloat. So that's encouraging. You can still apply. We have received 1,300 applications so far for 800 grants. So, but there is a vetting process here. So please, if you need to, go on the city's website, St. Louis Development Corporation. It's easy to find, easy to fill out the application. So those two things are what we are, the first two programs that we're pushing out with our CARES Act money. And on Wednesday or Friday, you'll expect to hear more from us with regard to rental assistance, housing assistance, to help people stay in their homes. So thank you for being with us. Jacob, you have a few questions?
We do have some questions that have come in. So Sarah is asking, Mayor, on the topic of the increases in young people between the ages of 20 and 40, what are some of the red flags that would prompt city leadership to look at possibly shutting the city back down again? And what's your advice for that younger demographic during this pandemic?
So let me advice for someone in the younger demographic. You know, first of all, I get it. You guys don't need advice. You know what to do. You're all smart. You're smart young people. The only thing that I would say to you is please recognize that it can happen to you. Maybe you saw the same story I did, a very sad story for someone who wasn't here in St. Louis, who had gone to he called it a COVID party. He was 30, I think, 30 or 31, if you saw the same story. He'd gone to a party and ended up who had COVID. He passed away in the last couple of days. And one of the last things he said to one of the nurses who was helping to care for him care for him, was just that I didn't think this was serious. I thought this was a hoax. And so how heartbreaking is that? I know, especially when you're young, you think, well, it's not going to happen to me. I mean, I understand that. Even older people feel like that sometimes. Oh, I mean, I'm healthy. It's not going to happen to me. But it actually can. And so my advice is, please, wear a mask. That's number one. 2, stay socially distanced. And just don't put yourselves in those situations that are where you're highly likely to be too close to someone or speaking very loudly, and that sort of thing. So that's my advice on that. Was there a second part to that question?
The first part of the question
Yeah.
was, what is some of the red
Oh.
flags or triggers that are going to prompt city leadership to look at possibly shutting the city down again?
So, we've said this before, that we continue to watch hospitalizations. And when you say shutting down, right now, I don't see a complete shutdown again. At least I sure hope not, because I think we're all smarter than that now. But what we are looking at is whether or not we need to pull back on some of the large venues and that sort of thing. We don't want to do that if we can avoid it. The metrics that we're looking at are how many people are going into the hospital every day. And one of the metrics that we set, a few weeks, maybe it's a month ago by now, with health order number 10, was that if we have a 7-day moving average of 35 people or more going into the hospital, we're at 27 today, that we would really consider pulling back. Or alternatively, if we have, is it 4 out of 5? Let's see, 3 out of 4. If we had 40 people a day going in the hospital for 3 out of 4 days, we would consider pulling back. We're really trying to persuade everyone to take the precautions and not have that situation occur.
On a similar note, Lashana Lewis wrote in, Mayor, asking what your thoughts were on a big city like Atlanta that recently announced that they're rolling back to phase 1. Are we, and you kind of answered this, how far away or close are we as the city of St. Louis to that?
Lashana, thanks for that question. Right now, today, we're in a significantly different situation than the Atlanta numbers. But it's not impossible for us to be in that situation again. And we are relying heavily on the pandemic task force for that advice. And as I just mentioned a minute ago with regard to number of hospitalizations, how many people are going to the hospital each day, those are the things that we're really looking at. That is a very, very tough move for a city that has been through an 8-week shutdown already. And we know that it's not about the inconvenience of a shutdown. It's about, because of course it's inconvenient, but it's also very devastating for many, many, many workers. And I think, think about this from the point of view of your friends and neighbors who may work in industries that if we did have to pull back again, would once again be without a paycheck. And but I mean, it's not about profit over health. We're always going to put health first. But we're asking, we know there are some effective things that we can all do. Number one, wear a mask everywhere. And don't put yourself in situations with big crowds of people. And, you could do that. So we, all of us individually, can determine whether or not that happens, the pullback happens.
We had a question from Shannon, who's watching and wrote in and asking if there's any news or updates on school openings in the city of St. Louis.
So there is no news on that. Last week, the health department, along with all the school systems, St. Louis public schools, charter schools, parochial schools, independent schools, all agreed on a set of guidelines for reopening, but no one has announced definitively when, if, or under what circumstances they will be reopening. These guidelines, happen to have them here, you know, the schools have to have an infectious disease plan. They have to have smaller group sizes, class sizes, have to maintain a minimum radius of at least 3 feet around every student's desk, if they're in a desk. So there are a lot of requirements for reopening, but I think we're all concerned about schools reopening. On one hand, I think we all believe that it's good for kids to be in school. That's where a lot of learning takes place. But here we are on July the 13th. School would not open for at least about another month, maybe a little bit longer. And so I think what we're expecting is that in a week or 2 weeks, you can expect to start hearing from your kids' schools as to what decisions are made. Because all the SLPS may make a joint decision and parochial is a joint decision, but I think what you're going to have is, a variety of things. And it's about, one, keeping kids safe. Kids will have to wear masks if you're over 9 or over, so that's about 4th grade, maybe some 3rd graders. So kids will have to wear masks, teachers will have to wear masks, be a lot of hand washing. And so that final decision has not been made yet. When it is made, it will be made by the school systems, not by the city. The city has joined with them in putting out the rules, the requirements, but the decision about when to open, whether to open, under what circumstances to open, those decisions will be made by your kids' schools.
Stu wrote in, Mayor, and asked, where can I in the city of St. Louis get tested and get same-day results, if that's even possible?
So, same-day results, the only place I know of that you get same-day results is in the hospital. And I hope you don't need to be in the hospital. But I know of certainly people who have gone in for various procedures and that sort of thing, and of course they are tested before they go in the hospital. Same-day results is not happening because, initially there was a shortage of tests. Now we have a lot of tests, but there's a backup with the labs that process those tests, and this is nationwide. This isn't just St. Louis. So, is that Stuart who asked? Stu. If you should really contact your doctor if you have a doctor, and if you don't have a doctor, and you can go to a federally qualified health center in St. Louis, Affinia, People's Health, STL, St. Louis Cares, STL Cares Health. So all of them give tests. There are testing sites in many places, so you won't have difficulty getting a test, but getting a same-day result is difficult unless you're in the hospital.
So Robert wrote in and asked, along the school's question, do you know if a decision has been made about whether youth sports will be allowed to happen when schools decide if they're reopening or not?
A decision has not been made about that, but I will say that, just as you're seeing across the country, group sports are curtailed a significant amount. So I don't know if you might be asking, will your kids' teams be playing basketball or will they be playing baseball? That'll be probably a little different. They probably could be playing tennis. That's more an individual, thing. So yes, that decision has not been made.
Is the city at all considering fines for people who are caught not wearing masks or businesses not enforcing the mask mandate?
Businesses not enforcing the mask mandate, those businesses, we try to educate, we try to persuade first. It's not our intention to be punitive with this. It's our intention to educate. We do have some abilities to restrict businesses or cause them, some difficulty if they just refuse. But for the most part, that is really not our intention. Our intention is to have businesses enforce it, and our intention is to have you do it. It's a requirement.
So we have some other non-COVID-19 related questions that have come in, Mayor.
Okay?
Erwin wrote in and asked, at City Hall, is the DMV open to the public?
Yes, Erwin, the DMV is open to the public at City Hall. Now, let me tell you, the lines are pretty long. So please, you're watching, so you're tech savvy, go online. The vast majority of what you need to do at the DMV, you can do online. And, you know, we were talking about this before we came on here. And 3 different people in my office either got plates or renewed their plates. Now, you can't take your driver's test online. You know, hopefully you don't need to do that. But the vast majority of what you need to do, you can do online. Because here at City Hall, they're pretty serious about this social distancing. And so, you know, you've got to wait in a line outside, sometimes in the morning, especially towards the end of June. We were seeing this. You know, the line was out the door and partway around the building. And so go online, try to do what you can. But yes, the DMV office is open.
And a similar question from Tyrone, who wrote in, Mayor, asking, are the courts in the city of St. Louis, have they reopened yet?
Courts have reopened. I don't have they had a jury trial yet?
I don't think they have.
I think
one
they're,
yet.
yes, but the courts have reopened, some limited basis. And everybody believes that, you know, everybody's figuring out how to do court under COVID. Yes, you would be eligible for the $5,000 grant. If you have fewer than 20, COC, continuum of care. We primarily are the funders for those organizations, helping to provide services for people who need a place to stay. You know, you can't possibly thrive if you don't know where you're going to sleep that night. So that's our goal, is to continue to try to provide as much service as we can, to be sure that folks do have a
Evictions question, Mayor, they were able to resume last week, and the question is, what can people do, or what assistance will be available for those facing it?
So, you know, we're going to talk more about that as we roll out our residential assistance program in the next few days. But let me say this. The evictions that resumed, it was last Monday, a week ago, were evictions that were in place before COVID started. So there was a freeze on implementing evictions. So anybody who's evicted in at least the next month are people that were in line to be evicted in February, January, February, early March. When COVID hit, we got the moratorium on evictions. So now we know that landlords can go back to court and seek evictions on people that haven't been able to pay their rent over the last few months. That's the beginning of a new process. So those people that have been affected by COVID are not being evicted yet. And so what we are doing is we will do mediation between landlords and tenants. I would always encourage you to pay what you can, to try to pay something as a good faith effort, but so that we can try to help mediate that situation and help provide ultimately some level of rental assistance. So we'll talk more about that in a few days.
We got a question, Mayor, from Brandon, who wrote in asking your thoughts on a petition that's circulating with a number of demands, not just for you, but Board of Aldermen President, the Comptroller, and the entire Board of Aldermen.
So what's the
Oh,
question?
sorry.
What do I think about that?
Your thoughts on, the question was your thoughts on the demands, which include closing the workhouse.
Sure, I have that petition here, so let me just kind of, I'll very quickly review it for you. So this is some demands made by a number of agencies. And, you know, many of these we are working on, but let me just tell you what they are. There are 5. One is that none of the CARES Act money go to the police department. The second is that the MSI, Medium Security Institution, be closed, and the money that we would have used there be spent on initiatives to benefit North St. Louis. A third is a demand to immediately suspend contract negotiations with the St. Louis Police Officers Association. The fourth is a demand to immediately release full, most detailed, unredacted line item budget for the police department. And the fifth is a demand to have a hiring freeze for the police department. So just real briefly, Brandon, I'll sort of take these one at a time. The CARES Act funding is, specific money is not going to the police department for the CARES Act funding. The second item is we're working very hard to figure out how to detain people who are accused of committing serious crimes in the best way possible. Right now, you may know there are about 90 people at MSI, and so we are working on that. We've been working on that for a couple of years. And you may know this, or maybe you don't, that the MSI has had a capacity of 1,168, I believe. So about a year ago, we completely closed the old portion of MSI, and that was over 800 beds. We call it the dorm. So the dorm has been closed for about a year, and the newer part of MSI does remain open with about 90 or so people in it today. We're working on ways to repurpose that facility and house those people in another place. It's complex. We don't want to move those people back and forth because of COVID. And it's also complex because there are groups who need to be separated one from the other. But we're working towards that. And the only reason we're really even able to talk about that at this point in time is for the work that's been done by many over the last couple of years. So that's that one. Immediate suspension of contract negotiations with the Police Officers Association. So we're required by law to bargain in good faith with all unions, and that we will do that. We will continue to have conversations with the Police Officers Association. So that is, you know, just like if it were the electrical union or the, you know, other unions. And then a detailed accounting, really, of the budget for the police department is available online. The budget for every year is available online. The police department, I think the department is 610 or maybe it's 620. It's very easy to find online, so we don't have any problem at all giving that information out. And a freeze on hiring for the police department. So that's a troublesome one, because right now we are almost 150 police officers short of our authorized strength. And our police department is really stretched thin. It is and has been very difficult to hire police officers because it's a tough job, and not everybody can or wants to do that job. So, I think running a police department on overtime is not the best way, and so I think the hiring freeze is something that we're really not considering right now. But I understand the sentiments of this, and certainly that we have just undertaken a review of the police department, a public safety review of the police department. It's being headed up by Chuck Ramsey, Commissioner Chuck Ramsey, who very well known and very well respected former chief. And so we have a good police department, and our police department is willing to examine, always to do things better, always to do things differently. So that's sort of it in a nutshell.
We have time for just a few more questions. Judy wrote in and asked, Mayor, what is going on with unemployment?
Judy, what is going on with unemployment?
It's
I don't
too
know.
high.
It sounds like you have a specific question. There's two parts to unemployment right now. One is the state part. You can get a little over $300 a week for the state part. The other part is the federal part, COVID-related part. You can get about $600 a week for that. That's around $900 a week. Unemployment is a state-run office, state unemployment office. I know that you can apply online. I know that I think calling them is difficult. I've heard that. But what is going on with unemployment is too many people unemployed, of course, and that's probably making it very difficult for the state to process claims. The other thing that's going on with unemployment is that July 24th or 5th, at the end of July, it's the federal $600 a week is slated to go away. Now, Congress will be meeting on this and other things next week. I spoke this morning with Congressman Clay. We talked about this, and it's Congress, so the Congress and the Senate, they've got to work this out. But there's some talk about extending the federal portion. There's some talk about maybe reducing it a bit, but extending it. So that'll be a negotiation that will go on.
Last two questions of the afternoon. Jessica is watching, Mayor, and asked,
Jessica.
What is the city doing to increase COVID testing capacity or capabilities in the city, including the ability to try and get test results back sooner, maybe in like 7 to 8 days?
So we have a good supply of tests available in the city of St. Louis. Literally anybody who wants a test, or I would say feels that they need a test, can get tested in the city of St. Louis. We have many testing sites, over a dozen, as well as, you can get tested at urgent care sites and that sort of thing as well. Doctors' offices, hospitals. So testing is now not the issue. The issue now is how long will it take Quest or LabCorp to process the tests. We're using Quest and LabCorp, and when I say we're really talking about the federally qualified health centers and these private urgent cares, etc. So the we here is that we're using the Quest and LabCorp. We're also using 1 or 2 private labs in order to try to get the results quicker.
Last question we have time for, Mayor. Jennifer's watching and wrote in and asked, how is the city of St. Louis helping the St. Louis Public Library system get off its feet and reopen safely? They can't exactly operate like they did before.
St. Louis Public Libraries opened, I want to say 2 weeks ago now. One of the things that we are doing is supplying masks to the St. Louis Public Libraries. So if you need a mask, you can get one there.
That's it.
Thanks all.